Welcome to the Unraveling Shaltazar podcast.
Hello, Mark. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. It's a busy time of year. For whatever reason, May. My dad was in education, and he always used to say May was his most unfavorite month because there's so much stuff going on, and so in addition to the regular workload, school's ending and graduations and a scholarship committee, and so we had to prepare a script for scholarship awards, and it seems like everything is happening in May. So it's been a lot going on.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, I have a little bit different perspective on May because it's my birthday month. So on the 28th, I'm going to be 69. So, but May, I think, is one of those months that are a transition month. They're sort of when you're you're getting into spring, and here in Toronto, the leaves are out full, the flowers are out. I've had an opportunity to have a couple of nature photo shoots, and so to me it's just like it's like something is happening. It's not like this is the first week that I'm starting to think about things I can do in the summer. Mm-hmm. So it's that transition where and I think that's as an educator, that's what your father would have felt, because you're getting close to into that into the summer holiday. Mm-hmm. So it is an energy of change, and of course, since we are in the midst of the great potential for change, the energy for change is even greater. We're also coming out of COVID, so it doesn't surprise me that we're sort of feeling this little bit of discombobulation mm-hmm. as we try to navigate the change, because for all change, a door needs to close for a new door to open. And so we're into that sort of door closing, door opening, and sometimes the door that hasn't closed yet is staying open. So we're dancing in that room, and we're dancing mm-hmm. in the other room. So it does feel like we are. It's very easy to be torn in different directions. I highly recommend listeners get out in nature and take some time for yourself, because otherwise it can be a little bit overwhelming. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that advice is for you as well, my friend. Oh,
thank you. Yeah, I will take it. We've been trying to do that, go out for walks. Last time we came back with a bunch of ticks, so we're gonna have to be careful where we walk. But it seems like this is a bad year for them. So, and mm-hmm. Canada, they're everywhere, right? You can't get away from them. So, at least that's what my old roommates from Canada used to tell me.
Well, get out in nature and cleanse that soul of yours. Otherwise, it's very easy to become overwhelmed in this transitional month.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. I can feel it myself. So I'll do that. Good. Interesting. You were talking about this being a time of transition. The message that I chose to talk about today is one called "Making Peace with the Struggle." And we were talking just before, this is an older message. It's a live channeling that you did. I want to say that the date that I saw on the recording on Insight Timer was 2015, but there's a reference here in the beginning that sounds like you were transitioning from 2012 into 2013. So you may have recorded this before 2015. Yes. Mm-hmm. But this message is kind of all about that whole idea of transitions, beginnings and endings, and one of the first lines that I latched onto here was from the divine perch. So it was talking about kind of stepping back from our involvement in our day-to-day activities and kind of climbing up on the mountain and sort of looking at things from a more global or divine perspective. It says you'll realize from that divine perch that the endings are often unpleasant, but how can there be new beginnings without endings? And that seems to be kind of the recurrent theme through this message. It's the idea of, as doors close, it doesn't feel real good, but it has to happen for new doors to open. So that's kind of the whole transition from the spring to summer that we were just talking about, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really important, I believe, that we pay homage to those endings. Sometimes things in our life that don't even feel comfortable, we hang on to them because there's a certain familiarity with the discomfort.
Right.
And what is it? Better the devil you know than the devil you don't, I think was an old saying around that. And I've suggested to many people over the years in my coaching that, to create rituals and to create homage, when there's an ending. I know, when our physical form transitions over, a lot of cultures, a lot of religions have rituals around death and dying and things like that, and that is because it's really important to sort of have that closure. Otherwise, that energy sort of hangs around in you, and so I find it's really, really important if you want to close that door, that you do some rituals to pay homage to those endings, and even if they are unpleasant. In the newest message that I channeled from Shaltazar, they're talking about as COVID ends, that we are having somewhat of an epidemic of fear that is remaining in the collective consciousness, and if we don't end this COVID thing with proper respect and homage, and be able to move on, then that fear is going to be stuck with us in the collective energy. So I think it's really, really important. And that message, again, it was very nostalgic. Thank you for picking it, because just before we came on, I was telling you that I used to do something called the Circle of Love and Abundance in our condo, and we would just invite people in to have an evening of meditation and to hear a Shaltazar channeling, and then to discuss it. And so, although the sound quality on that one isn't that great, it was really nostalgic to listen to it again. And they were really very much talking about the fact that that in order to do the best you can in that transition, you have to realize you have a choice. Mm-hmm. And are you going to choose optimism versus pessimism? Are you going to choose regret that a door is closing, or are you going to choose enthusiasm because a new door is opening? Mm-hmm. Before we got on, we were talking about your daughter picking a college and a career, and you and I was saying that, how can anybody be excited about a career in a world that you don't know what kind of career is going to be around for you, right? And here you are, 17, 18, you're going into college, and you have to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Well, at 50, I changed mid-path. I got a do-over. So Shaltazar is really, in this message, encouraging us to look at that change through different eyes, with a certain power that we get to choose how we allow those changes to unfold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That whole theme of change. And I'll apologize to the listeners. I'm having some work done in the house, and so there's some hammering you may hear. That's nothing to be alarmed about.
Well, excuse me for interrupting. I'm glad you clarified that, because the listeners may think that was Shaltazar and company banging to get the point across. It's like
right.
it's like an extenuated finger pointing, right? It's sort of like we're gonna bang until you get that. So yes, that is the tradesman. That isn't Shaltazar.
Yeah, right. Yeah, banging on the inside of my head, right? One of the things that intrigued me about that whole idea of choice is that. I'm firstborn, and so I have the burden of the world on my shoulders, right? So as an old soul, we all of us old souls have self-worth issues, right? And there's a phrase in here that said, talking about this idea of choice. Let us assure you that each and every choice you make, whether you choose light or dark, light, not dark, faith, not fear, optimism, not pessimism, each and every choice moves you closer to a place of oneness, to a place of compassion, to a place of understanding. So this idea that mean, I always thought that, every choice I make is the wrong choice. What they're saying is whenever you're choosing in the positive, right, that is somehow advancing the entire evolution of humanity, just by making that choice. It says, I'm not enough, I'm not doing enough, right? That's kind of that mindset. Well, you are just by making the right choice, which is kind of reassuring and refreshing to me. Made me feel good to think that way.
Right. And when you talk about right choice, what was kind of interesting in this message is they are saying that we learn by comparison. This was an insight and a concept that I forgot when it came up, because it's certainly been a part of my journey for a long time. And they are saying that we need the dark to be able to choose the light. We need the hate in order to be able to choose the love. Because we live in the duality, it is important to pay a certain reverence and respect to the underbelly of the duality. We talked about last week, our episode was on two sides of the same coin, and we talked about that duality. So it's kind of interesting that theme continues again this week. And so the darker side of the duality provides a tremendous gift to humanity for us to choose. And I think it's also very appropriate, although it was a number of years old. We are in a period where there's a lot of infighting and a lot of divisiveness, and Shaltazar is encouraging us to have empathy and have compassion for those that are choosing the darkness, because they are helping others choose the light by showing up, by seeing that which is unpleasant, that which is darkness. We are getting to be able to say, well, I choose not to have that darkness. I want more light. And so they talk a lot in that message about choice coming from comparison, and living in the duality is an important part of that, because the source comes from the unity. And that's where that quote that you talked about, when you choose something that is the light over the dark, you're moving more to that unity, and you're really bringing it all together. If that makes any sense.
Sure. Yeah. I always think. Well, my younger daughter was an athlete, or is an athlete, and she's had a string of really despicable coaches along her path, and. I always said to her, and she said this to me, that each one of them taught her how not to be a coach, and so you do need that dark example, or that negative example, or that despicable person, so you can stop and go, well, wait a minute, what do I want to be on this continuum? What makes sense? What feels better? Being that way or being this way, I guess, right?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of interesting, because in my coaching practice, I deal with a lot of people that have parental issues. It's like, don't we all, right? That's part of the game.
Right.
And people either really want to emulate their parents or just be the opposite of their parents, right?
Yeah.
And so I want you to know, and all those parents out there, no matter what kind of parent you are providing a useful service for your kids, because they're either going to emulate you or they're going to do the opposite. So either way, you've done fine in the eyes of the source, in my opinion. So it again, that comparison is really important, and I think, especially with the state of the world the way it is now, I think some of us are not making as conscious a choice. We're not looking at it in terms of what do we want to be more of. Like there's a lot of people stirring up divisiveness, and our freedoms were taken away, and a lot of blaming of governments and things like that. So I really encourage people, don't get into the minutia of it, but stand back as they bring the image of coming to the mountaintop. They say, come to the mountaintop with us so you can have a wider perspective of your life. And realize, and this has come out in messages after the one we're talking about, that every choice you make creates a different life. And so it is so important that you make those choices from a place of consciousness, that you weigh the opposites, you look at the duality. And a few times throughout that message, they said, do you want to make that choice from optimism or pessimism? Do you want to make it from love? Do you want to make it from hate? And it's really important to look at the energy of your choices. I think a lot of people are making choices without realizing the energy in them. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people, here in Canada, we're still in Toronto, we're still in kind of a lockdown, and people are looking and saying, oh, yeah, but look at the United States, there, where you are, things are more open. Well, yeah, you probably had more fatalities. It's sort of like weigh the whole picture, right? Don't go and look and see what this one has and want it, but look at it from your own perspective. Weigh it very, very carefully, the choices you're making, because the choices you are making today are creating the life you will have tomorrow, next month, next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm starting to see the polarities in that whole COVID confinement choice. I mean, down here, the sentiment has been a very large-scale transition from fear to, I don't want to call it bravery, because it's not really bravery, but I think people are just tired of being afraid of this thing, and they are like, okay, well, whatever happens, I'm not going to hide from it anymore. And so there's kind of been this transition away from being fearful and hiding from the virus to saying, okay, if you're going to come get me, come get me. I'm sure the vaccine has helped embolden people to some degree, but there's definitely been a change in attitude, I think, where people have chosen that, or made the choice that living their life is more important than whether or not they get impacted by this virus. So it's
beautiful example, excellent example of I think what this message is trying to tell us is that the darkness, the fear, got to that point where it's not worth it to live my life that way. Mm-hmm. I'm going to choose. And I liked your word bravery. I do think that we're seeing a certain bravery to be able to move beyond it. And maybe collectively that last message from Shaltazar was a real wake-up call about fear, and saying that it is a poison that needs to be eliminated. And it's kind of interesting. They say, that you have a desire to clean up the environment, Mother Nature, and that's really commendable. But you also want to consider cleaning up the fear that has poisoned your humanity. Mm-hmm. And so I'm inspired to hear, that from your experience, that people have gone beyond that fear, that there was just so much fear that they're now moving, without maybe even knowing it, to bravery. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what Shaltazar is saying, that would they move to the bravery? And I think that there's an opportunity for some great things to occur in our humanity now, and maybe the bravery of being pioneers is going to come from that intense fear of that pandemic. I'm a firm believer that pandemic was inspired by the higher power to help us change humanity. Mm-hmm. And so the deep darkness that we went through as a planet, as citizens of this planet, I think is providing exactly what this message is saying, the comparison to say, what do you want your future world to look like? Okay, mm-hmm. We've given you fear, we've given you restrictions, we've given you, think about all of the things mm-hmm. that we've had to experience in the last year and a half, and now we get to say, what do we want to choose? Right,
yeah. Yeah, and I like to use the word pioneers that comes up in this message. It says no matter what it is you are going through, no matter what it is you are going through, you are pioneers. You are the ones who go with it. So it kind of speaks to that idea that this pandemic has kind of shaken the foundations and made people stop and go, wait a minute, I've been so much on autopilot and so used to living, with no fear of something like this ever happening, or now it has happened. And so now what? Where do we go from here? And
Right.
Hopefully that is the choice of most people. Let's go forward without fear and make that choice to have faith and to trust and to be more aware of our fellow man and live a different life that's perhaps a little bit more conscious and aware of all that we do have and how important all these things that do feel good are.
I think it is a tremendous opportunity to pay homage to those that left their human form, that sacrificed their human lives so that we could change humanity. I think that is the homage that we can pay. It is so important that we stop dwelling on what was during the pandemic and start, by comparison, looking at the horizon. What do we want to create? What do we want to create? Just like after every world war, after every major conflict, you turn your focus to the rebuilding. I think we're turning the corner. Maybe that's what May is all about. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's time to start thinking about that rebuilding. Maybe it's time to start thinking about the doors that we want to open and how we as a humanity can live in greater peace, in greater harmony. In the Middle East, fighting is starting again. I predicted that there would be some social unrest after this. We're going to go through a little bit of a rocky road, but I certainly encourage the pioneers, as Shaltazar said, the awakened ones, to become a little bit more conscious and to help us change our world for the better.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Amen.
Yeah.
That's actually a great summary of the conversation. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I can't believe that our time seems to go by so quickly, mm-hmm. and I love it. And I think that's a testament to that resonance, to the synchronicity, to the energy that we share. So thank you so much for doing these things with me, Mark. I couldn't do it without you, and I greatly appreciate it. And I guess that's it for today.
That's it. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for bringing some light to this, and we'll see what we can come up with for next week.
Excellent. Thank you, and love and light to everyone.
If you have any questions about the Master Teachings of Shaltazar, we invite you to submit them to Jeffrey@jeffreyeisen.com, and we will make your question the topic of a future episode.